When Victor returned from 3 years of campaign, he brought with him a woman heavy with child. At the riverside dock where we unexpectedly met, he shielded her protectively behind him, as though fearing I might lose all composure in a fit of jealous rage. "Charlotte," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of earnest conviction, "I once promised you that should I return victorious, I would petition His Majesty to grant us a marriage decree. Even now, with Wendy here, that promise remains unchanged." I quickly raised my hands in protest. "There's no need for that. Charlotte, it's not what you think. I haven't betrayed you." He cut me off with desperate urgency, his eyes filled with anguish that seemed almost too genuine to bear. The moment I arrived at the frontier, I was ambushed and fell from a cliff. Wendy saved my life. She's been orphaned since childhood, and after living under the same roof for several months, her reputation was compromised. How could I not take responsibility for her? The men of the Qui family have always taken only one wife, but after we marry, you and Wendy shall both be my legitimate wives, equal in status. What do you think? Watching his expression shift between hopeful anticipation and troubled uncertainty, I felt a secret wave of relief wash over me. 6 months after his departure, I had already married. While I had harbored some guilt about him before, it now simply dissolved into nothing. "There's no need," I replied calmly. "I only ask that Master Victor treat his lady wife with kindness." Seeing my composed demeanor and apparent indifference, Victor seemed to believe I was merely putting on a brave face. A look of pity flickered in his eyes. "You're already 20 now. I know you truly cannot wait any longer. Tomorrow I shall petition His Majesty for a marriage decree, and in 3 days I'll bring you home with all proper ceremony." He gently drew Wendy to his side. "These past years, the frontier conflicts have been intense. Wendy and I haven't yet had a proper wedding ceremony either. We can arrange both ceremonies together. It's just that Wendy has endured much hardship with me and her health is delicate. Now, with her pregnancy, she truly cannot bear much travel. On our wedding day, I'll first welcome her bridal sedan into the household. After our ceremony, I'll immediately go to welcome you. How does that sound?" Wendy supported her waist with one hand, her smile gentle and gracious. "I hope my sister will understand. As I'm a year older, may I address you as sister from now on?" She caressed her swollen belly tenderly. "This child will be born any day now. In the future, he'll call you Little Mother as well." Having grown up in the Grand Joe family estate in Runan, I'd witnessed enough domestic scheming to find Wendy's affected performance utterly distasteful. "Victor," I said, pressing my temples wearily, "since you already have a wife and a child on the way, let's not speak of imperial marriage decrees anymore. Besides, His Majesty had already granted me one marriage decree. How could there possibly be another?" With that, I strode quickly toward my carriage. Last month, when I returned to Runan to honor my mother's memory, my husband wrote to me daily, urging my return. He must be waiting anxiously at home by now. Suddenly, my wrist was caught tight. Victor grasped me, his face wearing that familiar, mischievous smile. "Charlotte, I knew it. You were just pretending to be composed. Your jealous streak is something I know all too well. Remember that polo match years ago? I merely glanced at another young lady by accident, and you refused to speak to me for half a month. You only forgave me after I swore to heaven I'd never do it again." He leaned closer, his voice coaxing and persuasive. "Wendy has been alone since childhood. She knows my heart has always belonged to you. She stays with me only seeking shelter, and she would never compete for my affections. Think of her as an older sister helping you manage the household. Wouldn't that be nice? You've always been afraid of pain, haven't you? If you prefer not to bear children in the future, that's entirely your choice. Wendy is already carrying a son, which will satisfy my mother's expectations. She certainly won't pressure you anymore." He remembered my jealous nature. He remembered my fear of pain. Yet he had forgotten that when my father went to the capital as an official, he took a concubine within just 1 year, causing my mother to hang herself in her chambers that very night. He had also forgotten his own tearful oath to me after learning of this tragedy. I, Victor, swear to heaven that in this life Charlotte is my only love and I shall never waver if I break this oath. At the time, I couldn't bear to hear him say those terrible words about divine punishment, so I quickly covered his mouth. Victor, your word is enough for me. How fortunate that I hadn't taken him seriously. Just as before his departure, when he gripped my hand and begged me to wait for his return so he could marry me, yet never mentioned a word about formal betrothal gifts or ceremonies. Even then, I hadn't taken him seriously. When His Majesty granted my marriage decree, I merely fasted for 3 days before quietly entering my wedding sedan. Otherwise, how disappointed would I be now? My gaze fell to where he gripped my wrist, and I spoke coldly. Master Victor, please conduct yourself properly. Properly? He laughed bitterly, though his eyes were cold as winter frost. Charlotte, through 3 years of battlefield carnage, every time I crawled out of that hell of corpses and blood, you were all I could think of. I fought desperately for military honors just so you wouldn't have to marry into the empty shell of the Anyang Marquis estate. Now I've returned and you tell me to conduct myself properly? His eyes reddened with unshed tears, his gaze seeming to pin me in place. Just because I brought Wendy back, you no longer want me? Are our years of affection really so fragile? Tears gathered in his eyes, his face a picture of wounded innocence, as though I were the one who had wronged him. I wrenched my wrist from his grasp. Victor, 2 years ago, I wrote to tell you His Majesty was considering arranging my marriage, begging you to quickly propose to my father. Why didn't you reply? The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. If he had truly written back then, if I had waited those 3 years in vain, wouldn't I have missed Sebastian entirely? This thought made my chest tighten, and I quickly composed myself. Never mind, forget I asked. Charlotte, so you really are still holding a grudge. That's why you stopped writing to me these past 2 years? Victor's brow furrowed deeply. You're overthinking things. The Zhou family is merely an insignificant branch line in Runan. Even with your father holding the position of vice minister, His Majesty is far too busy with state affairs to concern himself with arranging your marriage. I knew you were getting impatient and made up that excuse to pressure me into returning for a quick wedding. Your only flaw, Charlotte, is not understanding what matters most. At that time, the army desperately needed experienced officers, and it was crucial for establishing my career. Yet you used such unseemly tactics to lure me away. He rubbed his temples wearily, sighing deeply. If I had replied then and indulged your whims, wouldn't that have encouraged even more unreasonable behavior? Husband, that's rather harsh, Wendy chided gently, tugging at Victor's sleeve. She turned to me, her eyes holding just the right amount of reproach. Sister may not know, but at that time, husband was recovering from serious wounds. Each day he did nothing but train and study military strategy. He couldn't even spare time for the lotus seed soup I prepared by hand. When I helped him change bandages at night, his arms were so swollen he could barely hold a brush. She lowered her eyes, wiping away tears. He simply couldn't spare the energy to deal with sister's emotional needs. Why must you make things difficult for him over old matters? Wendy, that's all in the past. Victor patted her hand gently, his tone tender. Don't cry anymore. It's bad for your health. Then he looked at me sternly. Charlotte, you must change this nitpicking habit of yours. Learn from Wendy's gentle and magnanimous nature. I curved my lips in a smile that didn't reach my eyes. My husband has never demanded I be gentle or magnanimous. What right do you have to lecture me?" "Husband?" Victor froze completely. Too tired to deal with him further, I climbed into my carriage and instructed my maid, "Jade Lotus, let's go home." "Charlotte, explain yourself. Where did this husband come from?" Victor's face darkened as he moved to block the carriage, but Wendy gently restrained him. "Don't worry, husband. Sister is just feeling spiteful and saying things to hurt you. Earlier, the way she looked at you was clearly full of deep affection. How could she have married someone else?" This reassured Victor completely. He crossed his arms and stood watching the carriage direction with fond exasperation, his eyes showing an indulgence Wendy had never seen before. 3 years, and you haven't changed a bit. You still know exactly how to manipulate me." The carriage stopped after traveling a short distance. I lifted the curtain to see the street ablaze with festive lanterns and crowds like flowing water. Jade Lotus looked at me apologetically. "Madam, it's the Lantern Festival tonight, and the streets are crowded. We'll likely be delayed quite a while. Perhaps you'd like to walk and choose a lantern for little miss?" Thinking of how my daughter would clap her little hands and giggle with delight upon seeing a lantern, I nodded. As soon as I stepped down, Victor appeared beside the carriage as though it were the most natural thing. "Charlotte, I'll escort you home. It's been 3 years since I've seen the master. I should pay my respects and discuss our marriage arrangements." He handed me a lotus lantern, his smile warm and gentle. "Look, your favorite." In the dancing firelight, his features appeared even more handsome. When I was 14 and my mother passed away, I traveled to the capital to live with my father. Victor was father's student, sent to meet me at the dock, and he had carried a lotus lantern just like this. With gentle waves reflecting the lamplight in dreamy patterns, he had looked so refined and elegant that he captured my heart in a single glance. But he thought it was the lantern I loved. Every year since, during the Lantern Festival, he would present me with a lotus lantern. Now the lanterns remained the same, but everything else had changed. I looked away, my tone distant. "Master Victor, please save that lantern for your wife." Before I could finish speaking, Wendy emerged from behind him. "I grew up in the countryside and have never seen such a lively lantern festival. Husband took pity on me and bought every lantern on this entire street. If sister doesn't like this one, please feel free to choose any other. I don't mind. After all, I can't take them all back with me anyway." She took out a handkerchief to gently dab the perspiration from Victor's forehead, her voice holding a coquettish complaint. "I told you I could walk a few steps on my own, but you insisted on supporting me the whole way. Look how you're sweating. Why don't we borrow sister's carriage so you can remove your outer robe and let me help you cool down? We can't have you catching a chill." She looked directly at me with a smile. "Please don't laugh at us, sister. In the army, conditions were crude, and we've always looked after each other this way." Without waiting for my response, she began pulling Victor toward the carriage. Though Victor protested mildly, he allowed her to lead him, his face full of indulgence. "I'm a grown man. How could I catch cold so easily? You worry too much." He casually pressed the lotus lantern into my hands again. "Charlotte, though Wendy comes from humble origins, when it comes to thoughtfulness and attentiveness, she far surpasses you, a daughter of noble birth. You'll have much to learn from her." "Ha!" I laughed in pure exasperation. "You two, this street is lined with inns and taverns. Can't you find a place to change clothes anywhere else? Why must you persist in bothering me?" Victor stared for a moment, then clicked his tongue impatiently. "Bothering you? Charlotte, I've been patient with your moods all day. How long do you intend to keep up this tantrum? In 3 days we'll be husband and wife. What's wrong with using your carriage to change clothes? Why must you be so petty about everything?" Even now he still assumed I would marry him. I stared directly at him, speaking each word clearly. Victor, setting aside the fact that I'm already married even if I weren't, what makes you think I'd want a faithless man? And furthermore, I turned my gaze to the defensive Wendy. My mother bore only me. I have no random sisters. Please remember this, Miss Wendy, and stop claiming kinship by calling me sister. I threw the lotus lantern back at him forcefully. How revolting! Jade Lotus, we're walking home! Charlotte! Victor exploded in fury, pointing at me and shouting, You dare to repeat the same lie twice? Married? Why don't you go ahead and claim you even have children? That might actually make me believe you. I stopped and turned back. Master Victor, you've guessed correctly. I really do have enough. Victor cut me off, his face a picture of mockery. I'll believe whatever you say, all right? He walked slowly closer, winking at me. Let me guess. This husband of yours wouldn't happen to be Sebastian, the one you mentioned in your letters before? The young chancellor whom His Majesty recently promoted, the Crown Prince's tutor, the capital's foremost scholar? So it was His Majesty who arranged your marriage? You've been wed for 2.5 years and now have both a son and daughter? How does this story suit you, Charlotte? In a daze, he had already grasped my hand and pressed it to his chest, feigning anguish. Listen, my heart is already racing with panic, aching as though it might split apart. After a pause, he smiled broadly. There, are you satisfied now? This playful, cynical manner was all too familiar. In the past, whenever I threw tantrums, this was exactly how he would jest and tease until I dissolved into laughter. But now I found it merely affected and disgusting. I yanked my hand away sharply. Victor, if you injured your head in battle, get it treated quickly instead of acting mad in front of me. His smile froze, and his expression turned completely cold. Charlotte, don't push your luck. Ah! Wendy suddenly screamed, seemingly in panic as she stumbled toward me, but her foot precisely kicked over the lotus lantern on the ground. Sparks scattered onto her dress, quickly igniting a small patch of fabric. She collapsed, clutching her belly and weeping as though her heart would break. Sister Charlotte, I only called you sister a few times, yet you want to burn me alive? If you resent me for being with Victor, you could have just said so directly. Why resort to such vicious methods? My status is lowly. I'm just a commoner. It wouldn't matter if a minister's daughter killed me, but my belly carries Victor's child. He'll be born any day now and hasn't even had a chance to see his father. Victor's face went pale as he frantically extinguished the sparks on her dress, pulling her tightly into his arms in lingering fear. It's all right, Wendy. I'm here. Nothing will happen to you or the child. No one can force you to leave, and no one dares harm you. Wendy continued weeping inconsolably, sobbing between gasps. Victor, I should return to the countryside. The people in the capital are too complicated, and Sister Charlotte can't tolerate me. I'm afraid I'll meet some mysterious end, and if our child loses his mother at such a young age, who would truly care for him? Victor's expression grew increasingly dark. He stood abruptly and fixed me with a glacial stare. Charlotte, what a poisonous heart you have. If you hate me for failing you, you can beat me or curse me all you like, but you shouldn't harm Wendy. She saved my life and cared for me tirelessly during those years in the army camp. She never asked for status or position. Her only wish was to stay by my side. He took a deep breath and roughly seized my wrist, forcefully pushing me toward Wendy. Apologize to Wendy and swear that you'll never harm her or the child again. I crashed to my knees, enduring the sharp pain as I looked up to meet Victor's eyes directly. Victor, she kicked over that lantern herself. I did nothing wrong. Why should I apologize? My chest felt tight with indignation. Thinking of my husband and daughter, my voice trembled despite myself. I haven't seen my husband and daughter for 2 full weeks. All I want is to return home quickly. Why must you and Wendy continue this endless harassment? You're the ones who should apologize." Jade Lotus quickly helped me up, glaring angrily at Victor. I saw everything clearly. Our mistress threw down the lantern properly, but this woman deliberately kicked it over. The surrounding crowd also began speaking up. "That's right. I saw the pregnant woman suddenly kick the lantern. The fire was already burning, but instead of avoiding it, she deliberately rubbed her dress against the sparks. These two are probably working together to extort this lady." Hearing the crowd's comments, Victor instinctively looked toward Wendy. Wendy gazed at him with tear-filled eyes, gently shaking her head. "Husband, I didn't." "Wendy, there's no need to explain. I believe you." Victor nodded without hesitation. When he turned back to me, his eyes held no warmth whatsoever. "Charlotte, I don't know what methods you use to make everyone speak in your favor, but Wendy has only me in this world, and I absolutely will not let her suffer the slightest injustice." His tone turned knife-sharp with coldness. "If you still wish to marry into the Kui family with honor, apologize to Wendy immediately. If you continue this willful behavior, I'll break our family tradition of taking no concubines. I won't petition for an imperial marriage decree. You can only be a concubine, and any sons you bear will forever be illegitimate." "Mama?" A sweet, childish voice suddenly called from beyond the crowd. Sebastian approached slowly in dark everyday robes, his bearing tall and straight as a pine. In his arms was an exquisitely beautiful little girl who was stretching her small hands toward me with bright, round eyes. Victor stood frozen in place, his gaze frantically scanning before finally settling on me with visible trembling. "She is calling you?" His voice shook uncontrollably as he pointed at Sebastian. "And who is that man? Don't tell me he's your husband?" Wendy stood beside him, tilting her head in confusion. "This child looks barely over a year old. Victor has only been at the frontier for 3 years. How could Sister Charlotte have a daughter over a year old? Unless right after he left, you—" She trailed off meaningfully, then looked at Victor with pity. "But Victor spent every day and night thinking of you at the frontier. Do you know how many wounds he suffered? How much hardship he endured? Every time he was seriously injured, your name was on his lips. Now he's finally returned alive, only to find you've already betrayed him. Is your heart made of iron?" These words made Victor's face even more ashen. He stepped forward urgently. "Charlotte, what is going on here? Explain yourself!" Looking at my daughter's little face that was carved from the same mold as mine, I could only find the situation amusing. Wasn't it obvious enough? I ignored them both, reaching out to take my daughter into my arms and gently caressing her soft cheeks. She giggled with pure delight, and that innocent joy instantly infected me, bringing an involuntary smile to my lips. Pearl is such a good girl. Sebastian naturally extended his arm to embrace both me and our daughter, his gaze coolly settling on Victor. Who exactly was suggesting my wife should become a concubine? Wife! Victor staggered backward, then shouted loudly, "She's clearly my betrothed! What wife are you talking about? Sir, though you appear distinguished, do you perhaps suffer from face blindness? Can't you even recognize your own child's mother? With so many people at today's festival, I had no idea there were those bold enough to publicly abduct good women right here in the capital. If you know what's good for you, leave immediately or don't blame this Marquis for being impolite." Sebastian's eyes flashed with cold light as he looked Victor up and down, then laughed in pure anger. "So you're Victor from the Anyang Marquis estate? The old Marquis has always been renowned for his integrity and honor at court. How did he raise such an ill-mannered, arrogant fool?" "You!" Victor hated nothing more than being compared to his father, and his neck flushed red with rage. What are you to comment on my family's affairs? Are you some actor Charlotte hired for show? He pulled out several banknotes from his robes and flung them at Sebastian's face. How much is she paying you? I'll pay triple. Get out of the capital immediately. You're nothing but a pretty boy who lives off women. How dare you put on airs in front of this marquis? Sebastian turned aside to avoid the flying banknotes, his eyes dark as a winter pond. Victor, I have no wish to make this matter public. Victor's eyebrows lifted smugly. Looks like money talks after all, finally willing to negotiate? Wendy chimed in beside him, saying gently, Since this gentleman is willing to accept payment, you should leave quickly. If this alerts the authorities, I'm afraid things won't end well. Victor looked at me with satisfaction. Charlotte, stop this charade. Your little performance has been exposed, so let it end here. I've been traveling for days to return to the capital, and I'm truly exhausted. Let me escort you home. Stop throwing tantrums. I was trembling with rage. Sebastian was a man of what stature? Even the crown prince addressed him respectfully as master, and all the court officials held him in the highest regard. Yet Victor had just humiliated him so thoroughly. Only because Sebastian cared for my reputation was he unwilling to make a public scene. Fury rushed to my head as I carefully handed my daughter to Jade Lotus, then fixed Victor with an icy stare. Master Victor keeps claiming I'm your betrothed. Then I ask you, where are the formal betrothal documents and gifts? Where are the engagement presents and ceremonial letters? Apart from empty words, do you have even the slightest proof? Victor was momentarily speechless. Years ago, I cut him off with a cold laugh. Years ago, you only told me to wait before your departure. Did you ever formally propose? 2 years ago, I wrote begging you to ask for my hand, and you couldn't even be bothered to reply with a single word. Now you suddenly remember you're betrothed? Victor, are you worthy of that claim? Victor retreated step by step under my questioning, his face cycling between pale and flushed. Wendy quickly steadied him, glaring at me angrily. Why must Sister Charlotte fixate on these formalities with Victor? His feelings for you are the greatest sincerity. Isn't that true? Formalities, I said mockingly. So the sincerity of the Anyang Marquis estate amounts to nothing but empty words. My gaze shifted to her swollen belly, my tone growing sharper. No wonder Miss Wendy doesn't value these formalities. That's how she could live unmarried with a man and conceive before any wedding ceremony. Such gentle magnanimity, truly the manner of a great lady. Wendy's face went white as she stammered her defense. You? What nonsense are you talking? Victor and I are deeply in love and already performed wedding ceremonies at the frontier. How could you call it unmarried cohabitation? Oh, then you have witnesses from both families and written marriage contracts? Does the old Marquis know of his daughter-in-law? Wendy was struck speechless, only able to look at Victor with reddening eyes. Husband, I only wanted to be with you. I'm not calculating like Sister Charlotte. Is that wrong? Charlotte, you've gone too far. Victor shielded her behind him, glowering at me furiously. I raised an eyebrow coolly, merely stating facts. Why such embarrassed anger? Both of them stood frozen in place, unable to utter a word. I had been patient before only because I was too lazy to argue. I simply wanted to return home quickly, but they had dared to humiliate Sebastian publicly, and I had never been one to suffer such treatment quietly. My tolerance was now completely exhausted. Sebastian gently took my hand, chuckling softly near my ear. My dear wife, your husband is rather grateful I never crossed you. Otherwise, with such a sharp tongue, I fear I wouldn't be able to get a word in edgewise. I slanted him a glance. Why such modesty, husband? In court, you can debate entire groups of officials while His Majesty can only smile ruefully in acknowledgement. How could you lose to me? Sebastian's eyes crinkled with deeper amusement. Losing to you would be my sweetest defeat. My heart fluttered slightly. Victor never liked to show weakness before me. Even when coaxing me, there was always an air of casual indifference, as though the fault were always mine. But Sebastian, the stern-faced chancellor who commanded such authority in court, was always so gentle and accommodating with me. I remembered our wedding day when I had harbored resentment and deliberately pinched his arm when alighting from the sedan chair, tried to trip him during the ceremony, and even replaced the ceremonial wine with a purgative. Though he clearly noticed all my little schemes, he still smiled and indulged me. For 6 months after our marriage, I never gave him a kind look, yet he returned home early each day to personally prepare my favorite dishes. After every argument, regardless of who was at fault, he was always the first to yield. "Charlotte, don't upset yourself. If you're truly angry with me, pinch me a few times to feel better, won't you?" Later, I couldn't help asking why he treated me so well. He smiled slightly. "Because years ago on the ferry, a young lady noticed that I ate only one steamed bun each day. Learning that I had just buried my mother and was traveling to the capital for examinations, she quietly placed all her money in my traveling bag. Only then did I dimly remember that during my journey to the capital at 14, aboard that ferry, I had indeed done this small, unremarkable act of kindness. I never imagined that one pouch of coins would gain me such a considerate husband." "Charlotte!" Victor's angry voice jolted me from my thoughts. "Who exactly is he? Why are you so intimate with him? What do you take me for?" I took Sebastian's arm and met Victor's bloodshot eyes calmly. "Master Victor, so devoted to achieving military glory, yet you don't even recognize our current chancellor?" Victor was thunderstruck, his face instantly draining of color. How could he possibly be the chancellor? After a long moment, he laughed aloud. "You claim the chancellor is your husband? Such absurd talk. Do you really think I'd believe that?" By now, many distinguished officials had gathered in the crowd. Seeing Victor's continued rudeness toward Sebastian, they spoke up mockingly. "Master Victor, when Chancellor Sebastian presides over court assemblies, this old minister stands in the third position. How could I be mistaken? The Anyang Marquis estate certainly has fine manners." Shouting at the chancellor in the street, completely disregarding proper hierarchy. Chancellor Sebastian and his lady were wed by imperial decree. Some people simply refused to recognize their proper place. Amid these comments, Victor's face became deathly pale. He stared fixedly at my hand intertwined with Sebastian's, then suddenly lunged forward like a madman. "Charlotte, this is how you kept your promise to wait for my return?" He reached out to grab my wrist, but Sebastian stepped sideways to block him. "Restrain him." Though Sebastian spoke quietly, his voice carried unquestionable authority. Instantly, several guards emerged from the crowd and seized Victor. He struggled desperately, screaming at me, "Charlotte, you can't treat me this way. What about all our vows and promises?" Sebastian led me toward our carriage, his tone calm and measured. "Escort Master Victor home. Tell the old Marquis that if he cannot control his son, this minister doesn't mind handling the matter himself." "Sebastian, what gives you the right?" Victor was dragged away by the guards but continued roaring defiantly. "Charlotte's heart belongs to me." Wendy hurriedly caught up, tears streaming as she clutched at his robes. "Husband, since she's already married another, please let her go. You still have me. I'll always stay by your side. Let's raise our child together and stop obsessing over that faithless woman." Victor suddenly grew quiet, his voice bone-chillingly cold. "Wendy, I thought you understood me. The one I wished to spend my life with was always Charlotte. As for you, I can distinguish clearly. It's only gratitude and duty, nothing more. If you hadn't hidden me from the search parties after my fall and forcibly kept me at your home, how would we have reached this point?" Wendy's hand trembled violently. "You knew all along?" Victor turned away. "Yes, and my greatest regret is not exposing you immediately back then." Wendy staggered backward, all color draining from her face. So he had always watched her schemes with cold eyes, witnessed her make a fool of herself in this doomed romance. Those 3 years of companionship, their daily interactions in the army camp, had his gentle consideration really been nothing but repaying a debt? When she had used every trick against me earlier, what did that make her? She thought she had broken us apart, that Victor would finally see his feelings for her and realize his attachment to me was merely youthful obsession. But it turned out to be nothing but her own wishful delusion from beginning to end. She pressed her hand to her swollen belly, feeling the world spin around her. In the moment she collapsed, she clearly saw a look of relief cross Victor's face. A bitter taste rose in Wendy's throat. So she and their unborn child had long since become burdens he couldn't shake off, obstacles preventing him from reuniting with me. As our carriage gradually disappeared into the distance, Victor allowed the guards to escort him away without once looking back at Wendy, who lay unconscious on the ground. Finally, one guard took pity and lifted her up. "My lady?" Sebastian gently lowered the carriage curtain and drew me and our daughter close to his side, his gaze settling lightly on Victor. "Is Victor truly so captivating? You seemed quite reluctant to stop watching." I turned back, slightly startled. Sebastian, who usually faced me with constant smiles, now had a tense expression. "Everyone has long departed, yet still you watch. With such a living, breathing husband right before you, does your wife find herself losing interest?" Only then did I belatedly catch the hint of vinegar in the carriage air, and I couldn't help curving my lips. "Husband, are you—" "Jealous," he admitted frankly, then suddenly leaned closer by half an inch. "Extremely jealous. How does my wife intend to make amends?" Those hands that were always so composed and steady now gripped my fingers tightly with unmistakable possessiveness. "Now surely you can tell me, why did you refuse His Majesty's offer to marry you to the eldest princess, even kneeling outside the Hall of Mental Cultivation for a full day and night, only to beg His Majesty to grant us a marriage instead?" I looked earnestly at Sebastian. "As Chancellor, you know everything that happens in the capital. You certainly knew about my past with Victor. Given your character, you wouldn't normally force such matters." "Why wouldn't I force it?" Sebastian's eyes were unfathomably deep. "That year on the ferry, you noticed I ate only a steamed bun each day, but you didn't know why I always lingered near you? It was because every night I saw you weeping at the bow, missing your deceased mother. I was terrified you might do something desperate." His fingertips gently traced my cheek as he sighed softly. "Charlotte, I had nothing to offer then and dared not presume. If I had known Victor would be waiting at the dock with a lantern, His unfinished words dissolved into a sigh, yet carried more weight than any oath. I leaned against his shoulder, speaking quietly. "Husband, I know. Military intelligence from the frontier was delivered to the palace daily back then. When a woman mysteriously appeared in the army camp, how could you not investigate? You knew even then that Victor had betrayed me, didn't you?" Sebastian's entire body stiffened. Without waiting for his answer, I looked at our sleeping daughter across from us and smiled. Fortunately, we didn't miss each other in the end. The next morning, Victor was dragged to the Chancellor's residence by the old Marquis. The moment they entered the hall, the old Marquis kicked Victor's legs, forcing him to kneel heavily. The old Marquis bowed deeply. "Chancellor Sebastian, yesterday this unworthy son behaved disgracefully and offended your lady's reputation. This is entirely due to my failure to teach him properly. I've brought him today to make amends. Should he ever offend again, Chancellor Sebastian may punish him as you see fit, even unto death." He then sternly commanded Victor, unfilial wretch, quickly apologized to Chancellor Sebastian and his lady. But Victor kept his spine rigid, gazing intently at me. Charlotte, come away with me. Sebastian only obtained this marriage through political maneuvering. You don't truly love him, do you? Do you remember what you said on your coming-of-age day? You said you had no other wishes in life. First, that your family remain healthy. Second, that you and Victor would grow old together. Is this the Marquise's idea of an apology? Sebastian set down his teacup with a gentle clink that made the old Marquise tremble. Yesterday he publicly humiliated a court official's wife, according to law, that merits 60 lashes and 3 years exile. Does the Marquis not know this? The old Marquise's face turned iron gray as he severely disciplined Victor. Worthless son, why don't you admit your wrongs? Under his father's harsh rebuke, Victor collapsed to the ground but continued staring at me obsessively. Charlotte, why didn't you wait for me? Why did you break your promise to me? I gazed at him calmly. 2 years ago in that letter, I begged you to propose to my father. But you said I was being a lovesick girl throwing tantrums and hampering your career advancement. Victor, you abandoned me first. Without Sebastian, after waiting 3 years, I would have been met with you bringing a pregnant Wendy and telling me you wanted to marry 2 wives on the same day. Tell me, how is that different from taking a concubine? He shuddered. Charlotte, I said I would treat you both equally. Neither would be a concubine. You never understood me. When my mother took her own life because father took a concubine, I swore I would never cling to a faithless man. Victor looked at me miserably. If you dislike Wendy, I'll send her to the country estate immediately and never see her again. Would that work? I was so shocked I couldn't speak. After a long moment, I said, Victor, what I despise is your fickleness. What does that have to do with anyone else? If your resolve were firm, even 10 Wendys couldn't shake it. She's about to give birth and setting aside the life debt after 3 years together. If you have any decency left, you should give her proper status. Seemingly unable to believe I would defend Wendy, Victor broke down sobbing. You would push me toward another woman? I was momentarily speechless. You're truly beyond help. The old Marquis was so frustrated he stamped his feet repeatedly. Chancellor Sebastian, my lady, I am utterly ashamed. How did I raise such an unreasonable wretch? Sebastian wearily rubbed his temples. Today was supposed to be a rest day for visiting the red maple leaves with our family, but Victor's disruption had ruined the mood. He closed his eyes and said coldly, Take him away. If this minister hears his crying again, I'll have him sent directly to the palace for His Majesty's judgment. The old Marquise hastily covered Victor's mouth and awkwardly dragged him away amid muffled sobs. Sebastian turned and took my hand, his fatigue replaced by a gentle smile. Though we've missed the proper time, if we go to Perch Mountain now, we can still admire the maple forest in sunset light. The wet nurse brought Pearl over, and our little daughter waved her chubby arms. Papa! Mama! Red! Red! Sebastian smiled as he took our daughter, gently tapping her nose. Pearl wants to see the red leaves too. I wrapped my arms around Sebastian's waist, embracing our daughter as well. When I first came to the capital alone all those years ago, how could I have dared dream of possessing such precious happiness? After the old Marquise dragged Victor away that day, he sent both him and Wendy to the frontier army camp that very night. During the journey, the two quarreled repeatedly, and at the worst moment, Victor actually grabbed Wendy's throat and cursed her, telling her to get lost. Wendy finally gave up hope. That night, she left on her own, and Victor made no attempt to follow her. In the army camp, Victor remained an officer, with the old Marquis begging the general to keep strict watch over him. For the first 2 years, he repeatedly tried to escape back to the capital to find me. Each time he was captured and brought back to face severe military punishment. Later, he stopped trying to flee, spending his days only in desperate charges against the enemy, until finally he died in a surprise attack by enemy forces. When they sorted through his belongings, they found a broken lotus lantern in his tent,